All right, so it looks like I'm live. In this video, I'm going to be sharing about letting the love of God in. And this is a topic that is very close to my heart because this has been my life's journey so far in this life, and I feel like many lifetimes. I feel like ultimately this is the journey that we're all walking on this plane, is coming back to the truth of God's love and letting that in, letting down all the walls, all the barriers, all the thoughts and beliefs and perceptions that we have accumulated through many lifetimes that has shut the light of God, the light of truth, the love of source out of our mind, of our heart, of our soul, and therefore our life and our reality. So this is what Spirit has guided me to share about today, and I'm just going to see what comes through. This is a deep surrender experience for me because in these videos I'm not thinking about what I'm going to share beforehand. I will just be sitting in prayer and meditation and opening to God's love myself and letting that love and that light guide my words. So, yeah, let's see what wants to come through. So, the truth is that we are so loved. We are so loved, like to the point that we actually couldn't even comprehend it with our human minds, because the love that we come from, that we are, and that we return to is of a different caliber to the kind of love that is being experienced and shared on earth at this time. And so coming back to this love is really, it's a huge quest, and we don't see references of the kind of love God has for us and the kind of love that exists in our being. We don't have references for this kind of love in our culture at this time. And so this is really a journey of finding this love within and finding the light of God within. And the truth is that the light of God is in each of us. It is in our soul. And so the search, the quest for what we really are, this love, and the quest for God, it's the same thing, and it's a journey inwards. There might be things in the external world that can support this journey, but ultimately this journey is a journey inside of ourselves, into our own heart, into our own soul, and really coming face to face with everything that we've built that is veiling this love from our conscious awareness. Because within our center, within our core, we are the light of God. We are God's love. And so we can never be separate from that. It's within us and it can't be taken from us. It can only be hidden. And so really what any true spiritual journey is about is starting to direct our focus towards this light within, even if we can't yet see it or feel it or know it directly. The journey to awakening to this divine love, this unconditional love that our Creator has for us, is about facing and working through and undoing all the layers that are veiling or obscuring this light and this love within us. And really, this is the hero's journey, the journey of turning inwards and facing what we find there is a hero's journey, because that journey back home, the home within us, the light of God, which is within us, the journey that we will be asked to take ourselves back there and to awaken to, unveil, open to that light, is going to ask us to confront what is hiding it. And what is hiding it is experiences that we've had in this dualistic realm, in the forms of thoughts, beliefs, perceptions. Really, it's all just energies and frequencies that have accumulated and wrapped themselves around this diamond, pristine light within us. And as we have this deep devotion and desire to awaken to this love, to find the love of God, we're going to have to work through these frequencies, these energies that are wrapped around, so to speak, the light within us. And so how do we do that? How do we face these energies and frequencies and actually work through them? And I say that this is a hero's journey because it actually requires so much courage and bravery and a deep, deep desire to come back to the truth, come back to the light, come back to God, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. Coming back to who you really are, your essence, your true nature, your potential, it's all the same thing. Those phrases are all pointing to the same thing. And it's the way that I describe it is the light of God, which is the light that exists within every soul. And in my humble opinion, I feel like this is really all that matters. Coming back to this light and awakening to God's love and God's light within us is really all that matters, because that's the truth. That's the oneness we share with God and all of life. And so long as we're pursuing anything other than that, we're still in the illusion, in the dream of separation, chasing things, chasing forms, fleeting forms that, they might matter to us for a moment or a week or a few years. But ultimately, especially from the point of view of our soul, multiple lifetimes, so much of what we're chasing is completely meaningless, but we get entranced by it. And that's kind of the nature of this realm, this dualistic realm, where we have this very deep and pervading belief system in separation and individualism. This belief is so strong and so deep and so entrancing that we get lost in the dream of duality. We get lost in the dream of physicality and trying to build a home for ourselves in dualistic reality, which, from the perspective of our eternal essence, it just doesn't make sense to try and build anything in physical reality, because this isn't our true home. And, this is just an experience that we're having. Our true home is in the light of God, in the changeless, eternal, constant, steadfast, stable light of truth. That is where our true home is. And we have just forgotten that. We have entered into this dualistic realm for most of us many, many lifetimes ago. And in a way, we've kind of gotten stuck here because this realm is so dualistic, it's so dense, and the veil of separation is so convincing. You know, I know this firsthand because when earlier in this life, I was completely asleep and completely in the dream of being a human. And yeah, it feels so real being here, and all of the things that we're programmed and conditioned to care about, they occupy so much of our psychic mental space, and we just get completely lost in that. And that's kind of the human condition at this point, except we're really going through a time of awakening now. And this is, the prophesized time of awakening, and God is calling us home. Those of us who have the ears to hear and the heart to feel it, we're being called home. And for most of us, if not all of us, I feel like the way that we are called home is through suffering at this time. It's through suffering because we're so attached to the things that we've given our power to in this dualistic realm. We've become so attached to our ideas of what we think we are, who we think we are, what we think we want. And, like I said, we become completely entranced in pursuing those things to no end. Really, the only thing that ends that relentless pursuit of building our home, finding our salvation in physical reality, is suffering. And suffering comes because we wouldn't be woken up out of that spell if there wasn't some kind of a curveball or some kind of an intense catalyst that, kind of brings us to our knees and shakes us enough to our core that we actually stop and we actually create enough spaciousness in our mind, in our heart, in our reality to start to contemplate, well, am I on the right track? Is there something else here? Is there something deeper? Am I missing something? These kind of questions start to arise when we get stopped in life. And I can say from personal experience that I needed to be brought to my knees multiple times. I'm not talking just once and I was like, okay, now I trust God and now I'm listening to God. Our ego, our false self, who has been entranced in duality, is so strong. It has such a strong momentum that has likely been going for multiple lifetimes, if not hundreds of lifetimes. That momentum is so strong. And the stronger the ego is for us, the more we have to be brought to our knees, so to speak, so that the ego can actually crack. That beautiful quote, the crack is where the light gets in. It's like we're so in our own dream, lost in our own dream of our own making in our mind, that suffering comes as a loving nudge. Sometimes it's more than a nudge. Most of the time it's, a huge hit over the head, and it can be so painful. And it has been for me, letting go of control and all of these qualities that our ego has. Our ego basically wants to be its own God, and that is its agenda, is to be its own God. And so it's trying to be in control. It's trying to think for itself. It's trying to dream up its own version of what it thinks it should be happening. But it's operating in complete isolation from God, from God's plan, from God's will. And for some of us, I don't know why, we are allowed to experience some prosperity and abundance and success and flow through our ego's endeavors. And for some of us, we experience that for some time, and then the catalyst comes. But for me, I was never really allowed to succeed or prosper on my ego's timeline, which was very painful for my ego, because I tried so many times to, follow my bliss and make my life work on my own terms and start my own businesses and create all of these things in my life, which were essentially coming from my spiritual ego and coming from what I'd seen on Instagram that lit me up. I was like, well, if they can have that, then I can have it too. And so I was on this relentless ego's quest to make my life how I thought it should look, based upon what I'd seen on Instagram or what I'd seen in other people when I lived in Bali. And so I was, following this blueprint that had been conditioned into my mind. But for me, God wouldn't let any of that work for me. And, that was extremely painful, because I just felt like I was hitting this brick wall again and again and again. And it was just like nothing worked. And each time I tried something, I would go through this ego death process where I would be brought to my knees, and all of this anger and rage and feeling forsaken by God would start coming up. And I was asked to sit with all of that and come face to face with it. And this is what our suffering does. Our suffering ends the dream of being the separate self, fighting for survival or success in this world of billions of people. Our suffering comes to end that dream, and it actually comes as a messenger to call us home. And if we're ready and we're willing to answer that call, then the light will meet us and guide us on our path back home, on our path back to the love of God. And what that path will look like will be completely unique and completely different for each one of us, because we're all such a unique being. And as a soul, we've lived such a unique journey. And we all are here for a different purpose. But the only purpose that has any meaning and any substance to it is the purpose that God has for us, which is the same thing as saying the purpose of our essential self, because our essential self is the place where we touch God, is the place where we are made in the image and likeness of our Creator. And so coming back to our essence means coming back to God. It's the same thing. God created our essence. And so God has placed into our essence the purpose that we are meant to fulfill. And this was something that I needed to confront in my own journey, in the thousands and thousands of deaths that my ego had to go through. There was this recurring pain in my ego of, well, what about my will? What about my dreams? Like, it actually felt like giving my life to God and handing my destiny over to God, to God's will. That was registering as a huge loss for my ego. And essentially it is, because in order for us to live God's will, the ego actually has to die. And that's very painful, especially, we're identified with our ego. until we start to awaken and start to really, question, well, who am I really? We are identified with our ego, which is what it means to be unconscious or to be asleep. And for me, it was quite confronting to realize, I was in the spiritual community before finding my way back to God. And I'm not religious. I didn't grow up religious or anything like that, but my journey started with personal development, which then led me to meditation, which then led me onto the spiritual path. And so I was in the spiritual circles for many years. And, I thought that most of the people in the spiritual circles were awakening or awakened. But what I realized when I really started to awaken myself is that most of the spiritual community aren't awake and are still identified with their ego. It's become a spiritual ego, and it, you know, knows all the lingo of the spiritual realm and, talks about love and light. But I too, in that phase, was still identified with my spiritual ego, and that's still not it. And the tricky thing about the spiritual ego is it's more sophisticated than your typical human's ego, but it still is being asleep to who we really are, because we're not an ego and we're not a separate self. And so this is what the awakening journey, the authentic awakening journey, asks you, is to let that go, let that separate self, even if it's very spiritual and very loving and, has its sights set on like bringing peace and love to the whole planet. And, it can still, the ego is cunning, and it's a genius. It knows how to create a self-image separate from God that completely entrances us. And so waking up from that is a hero's journey, and it requires so much courage, so much honesty, and the deepest desire in your heart to be what you truly are, to be what God made you to be, and to be the image and likeness of God, which is infinite and unconditionally loving, and like literally an embodiment of peace and love and joy. And we don't have examples of this on this planet at this time, which makes it hard, because humans are always looking outside for a reference point to give them permission for what they can be. But God is asking us to turn within and seek Him, to seek the truth, to seek the light. And we have been given everything we need for that journey. It's all within us. It's all within God's creation. And I'll be sharing a lot more about that and, the allies we have to walk this path, because we can't do it alone. We are so entranced and mesmerized by the world of form that we have created in our own mind, and all of those desires and cravings, yearnings of the false self, the separate self. We have created such a complex, intricate dream of duality that we need help to be able to see the forest for the trees. And so we have that help. We have that help. We have guides and allies that can help us walk that path. And so our suffering comes as a divine call to awaken. And so just know, if life has felt hard, if things aren't going your way, if things are crumbling around you, if it feels like you're being asked to die on some level, not physically, but like parts of your life, parts of your mind, parts of your personality, your relationships. If it feels like things are crumbling, just know that this is the hand of God, and it's actually the hand of love saying, hey, come on, this isn't what you really want. This isn't what I want for you. I want so much more for you. I want you to be the light that I've placed inside of your soul. And I want you to share love, and I want you to prosper, and I want you to live in the glory and the magnificence of me, of your true nature, me as in God. And, I want so much more than this for you, child. But so long as we have these deep fears in our ego mind, in our subconscious, we will fight tooth and nail for what we think will bring us salvation. And the more we fight, the more we resist, the more we will be brought to our knees by life. And life will only bring us to our knees when we're actually ready to begin coming back home, coming back to God. Life will not bring us to our knees if we're not ready to walk that path, because what's the point? And each of us will only become ready to walk the path back to God, back to the truth of who we are, back to our essence, back home. All means the same thing. We will only walk that journey when, on some level, we're done. We're done with the suffering. We're done with the struggle. We're done with the dead ends. We're done with the superficiality, the emptiness, the shallowness. There comes a point for each soul where it's like a doneness arrives. And that moment is celebrated in heaven by our guides and angels, because when we become done is when the crack happens and the light actually has space to enter. Before, it was just filled with all our fears, all our desires, all our yearnings, all our cravings. We were just asleep in a daze with duality and the dream of the separate self. But when suffering brings us to our knees and we're literally on the floor and we have no fight left in us, something surrenders. And that is such a beautiful moment, because the journey back home to what we are is going to ask so much surrender of us, because we don't know. We don't know who we are. We don't know how much we are loved. We don't know how to bring ourselves back home to eternity, to infinity, abundance, joy, love, connection, all the things, the glory of God, which is where we come from and where we're returning to. We don't know how to get back there. Otherwise, trust me, we would be back there. Because that place makes here feel like just grayscale. But we can bring that light. We can bring the light of God, the light of our essence, the light of heaven. We can bring that light to earth. And that is what is being asked of humanity at this time. And so suffering is here as a wake-up call, as an act of love to awaken you and to loosen your grip on what you have been grasping onto, thinking that that would bring salvation. Whether it's success, money, relationship, freedom, all of these things that we think we can find in the world of form, these things can only be found in God, in their true and lasting and stable, secure, permanent form. They can only be found in the truth of who we really are, which is the light the light that we are, that our Creator created us to be. And so we have to be surrendered, we have to be humbled, and the ego needs to, layer by layer, piece by piece, it needs to be dismantled, dissolved, and really, I don't know if we come to a point where we have no ego in this realm, but it can come to a point where it basically takes a back seat and it's completely minimized, and our essence can lead, which is the same thing as saying God can lead. What our essence wants is the same thing as what God wants for us. God's will for us is our truest will for ourselves. They're not separate. And so this is where our suffering comes from, is our ego has a will and God has a will, our essence has a will, and they've become separated. And we have been listening to the will of our ego. And God is calling us home and wants to bring us back into oneness with all of life. So, this is my message for today. I have walked this journey, and it is the journey of a hero to come back to God and to lay down everything that our ego has created, dreamt, attached to. We will die 1,000 times in this journey. But once you're ready, once that moment has come for you where you're done with duality, you're done with the dream of separation, that journey it'll be the only way. And there is support at every step. There is comfort, there is encouragement, there is love at every step of that journey if you're willing to let it in, because God doesn't want us to walk alone. And so we have support in spirit. And as we learn to let that love and support in, that support will manifest on the physical realm as well, because it's all a reflection. So I hope this lands for you in the perfect way. I would love to hear your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. You can learn how to connect with me in more ways in the description below. And if this video touched you, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'm sending you so many love, so many love, so much love, and so many blessings. And yeah, until next time, bye for now.